Fort Smith is one of the largest cities in Arkansas, which is southern Dixie state of the old Confederacy, with its share of historical prejudice, bigotry, and mistreatment of blacks. Even in decades since the Civil Rights Movement, it wasn't until the modern era, entering the new millennium, that the city began to shed its intolerant past. In May of 2012, Fort Smith recognized Bass Reeves with a bronze monument sculpted by Harold Holden of his extremely popular black icon, the first black and perhaps the best U.S. Marshal in history. On August 14, 2018, George McGill was elected and on New Year's Day 2019 sworn into office in front of hundreds at the Judge Isaac C. Parker Federal Building as Fort Smith's first black mayor. Despite great strides in progress, there are still pockets around the nation where social injustice occurs, and cascading events finally blew the top off where social injustice towards blacks would become front and center. On May 25, 2020, 46-year-old George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis police custody in a brutal way by Officer Derek Chauvin, while other officers looked the other way. This sparked outrage in the U.S. and around the world. For about 8 minutes, that Officer Chauvin's knee would be on Floyd's neck, cutting off his breathing. "I can't breathe" became the rallying cry as protests erupted across the nation. This time, everyone was galvanized behind the BLM movement in support of George Floyd, including police officers across the nation. As far as any records show, the first four-star police chief to respond on social media was Danny Baker of Fort Smith on May 27th in a video that went viral around the world. Here is that video in its entirety as broadcasted live from the police department's Facebook page.
Hello y'all, Chief Baker here. I need to get real with y'all for a second. There's something that's been weighing on my mind quite heavily today. Been weighing on my mind for quite some time actually. But today was particularly difficult in light of recent incidents in Minneapolis, Georgia. I know that you're struggling. I know that you're confused. I know that many of you are downright angry at what you're seeing, and you have every right to be. I'm angry too, and I wish that I had all the answers. I wish that I knew why these things were happening, and I could give you understanding, but I don't even have that. So I'm not going to try to do that. But I think it's important for Fort Smith and for our community for me to step up and say something, because silence is not working. Pretending that it's somewhere else and someone else's problem is not working, and it's certainly not helpful for you, our citizens. It would be easy enough to say, you know what, Chief Baker, it's not our fight. No reason to get involved in it. Just let it play out. Why would you want to attract undue attention to yourself? And I get that, and there's a big side of me that wants to listen to that voice. But it's that voice that keeps silencing people so that these things keep happening. And I don't want to be guilty of that anymore. No, I don't understand why things are going the way that they are. But I know what we need to do to make it stop. And I'm committed to do that. I'm a very firm believer in the Bible and the principles that it teaches. And there's a scripture in the New Testament that police officers are very fond of. And it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." We love to use that verse as proof that our profession is a calling, that we're peacemakers and that God's pleased with that. And I believe that's true. But the things that I'm seeing in this country today are anything but peacemaking. In fact, if anything, it's creating a bigger divide between people. And so I want the folks of Fort Smith, I particularly want our African American and our black friends and neighbors to know that we at the Fort Smith Police Department see what's going on around us. And we're committed to doing our dead level best to make sure that nothing like this happens in Fort Smith.
Bridging the Gap is an annual community event since 1977 whose mission is to try to heal issues of shortcomings that come between the community and the citizens. This year, it was held at the Riverfront Park in Fort Smith. Joey LaCarrie and myself represented History Dog Productions that was invited to film this special event. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, organizers followed the State Health Board guidelines for participants using city paramedics to screen all who would enter the park. Everyone who entered were issued a green wristband showing that you passed the screening. Once inside, we met the organizers, Janice Justice, the Director of the Comprehensive Juvenile Services, and Belinda Scott, the Assistant Director. Together, these ladies put the event together with sponsors including Arvis Bank, who's donated food and water, and the bands that would provide entertainment, all free to the public. Jacob Kotner of KNWA Fox 24 News also interviewed Janice and Belinda. But the main attraction this evening is Police Chief Danny Baker and former Sebastian County Sheriff Bill Hollenbeck, and what they plan to do to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the black community in light of what happened to George Floyd. Former Sheriff Hollenbeck and Chief Danny Baker brought the local River Valley police chiefs and county sheriffs together to make a pledge to black lives in this jurisdiction. Crawford County Sheriff Ron Brown, Chief Deputy Kevin Nixon of Sebastian County for Sheriff Hobrunian, University of Arkansas at Fort Smith Police Chief Ray Ottman, Chief Darrell Spells of Barleen, Chief Levi Risley of Fort Smith Medical College, and Chief Jamie Hammond from the Van Buren Police Department. All are present to sign their names to this pledge.
I logged into Facebook and I saw a video of my chief of police telling me from his desk that he had my back, and that meant a lot to me. Because I know Danny means that from the bottom of his heart. He has my back and he has everybody who's here's back. Danny means a lot to me personally, man. I know his heart. He's a great man. I can't say enough amazing words about him or I'll get the same man. But so welcome our amazing Chief of Police, Danny Baker.
Testing 1, 2. There it is. All right. Sam, I love you too, man. I really do. I want to apologize to you in advance for bringing a prepared statement, but I have a lot of things that I want to say, and I want to make sure that I get them said. And I know that it's hot, and so I'm a firm believer in making the most of every opportunity that I have to engage the community and be involved with the community. So good evening, Fort Smith. It's a great day. It's a great time to be from the River Valley and be from Fort Smith. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and especially for allowing me to serve as your Chief of Police. I know that we have a very special thing going on here in Fort Smith and the River Valley, and I'm excited to be in this place at this monumental moment in our nation's history. I believe we're at a turning point, not only for policing in America, but also in regards to our relationships with one another as people who are doing this thing called life together. We have an opportunity right now to tear down and tear away so much of the old hate and distrust and downright bigotry that's plagued this country for far too long. And so I thank you for letting me be a part of that. I want to thank our Mayor, George McGill, for his leadership and for his love for this community. He, along with the City Administrator Gefkin and the Board of Directors, are committed. I can promise you this, they're committed to our continued success. And Mayor McGill's belief in Fort Smith is unmatched. I'm proud to serve with him, and I'm proud to call him a friend. I also want to extend a special thanks to anyone here who might be with the Black Lives Matter movement, who's been so instrumental in not only paving the way for you to have your voice heard in many demonstrations and protests in and around Fort Smith, but who've also been working behind the scenes to ensure that your voices are heard in a way that is loud and clear, but peaceful and lawful. Because of the way you've conducted yourselves, your voices have been heard in the River Valley. And many people are examining their hearts right now. They're identifying prejudices and biases and other ugly things in themselves, and they're working to change. I know I have. I'm daily finding things about me that I didn't realize that I needed to fix. I'm learning things about our history of this country that I've been ignorant to. And I'll be the first to admit that there's always room for improvement in me. So when we know better, we're obligated to do better. And I'm committed to doing better. I know that there are many others who are doing the same thing, and let me tell you, that's something meaningful. That's exactly what has to happen for there to be lasting change in all aspects of society, in policing, in our public schools and housing, economic opportunities, higher education, and yes, even our places of worship. We've heard it said many times that you cannot legislate morality. So let me put that another way. Systemic changes must be predicated by a collective change of heart. And I believe that's happening all around us today. And because of that, I want to thank each of you. I want to thank you for your desire to see a better future. I want to thank you for your willingness to stand up and say enough is enough. To say that this country has had enough time to grow up, enough time to set aside all these old hurts and habits and hang-ups and begin actually becoming a country that believes that all men are created equal. So while I'm grateful for the special bond this community has, and I'm thankful for the peaceful ways in which your anger and frustration have been expressed, I acknowledge that this was only possible because of you. I also acknowledge that even though things may be better here in Fort Smith than some other places, we still have a lot to work on. I still have a lot of things to work on with me. And I know that there are still changes needed to improve the Fort Smith Police Department. One of those things is diversity in our ranks. We need you. We need you to help us. We need you to help us be the best police department that we can be, because this community deserves nothing less. I want to encourage you young people that hear me tonight. I want you to continue your passion for change. But that also requires you to be the change you desire. You can't simply demand change in others and refuse to be a part of the solution. We want you involved in government. We want you wearing a badge and helping to be the very best. We want to see you succeed. And as you're going to hear in just a moment, we're going to do everything within our power to help you succeed. But that comes with a certain amount of personal responsibility on your part. Obviously, you need to continue to hold us and all government officials accountable. That's always important. But we need you to make good decisions now. Don't buy into the devil's lie that success is quick and easy. It's not. True success requires hard work and dedication. It requires looking down the road and making choices now that ensure future successes. Nothing meaningful and worthwhile is easy to come by. And we're going to give you our commitment to help you succeed and achieve that success. We're not going to work against you. You have my promise to that. God used a young man named David to kill the giant Goliath using nothing but a pebble. If your cause is righteous, God will help you tear down giants with pebbles. But I also want to encourage you to listen to the words of the Apostle Paul, who gave this advice to a young man named Timothy who was also trying to change his world. He said, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for them in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So let's leave this place tonight committed to one another and to the notion that people can change and systems can be reprogrammed in love, faith, and purity, and that violence is never sought or welcomed in our community. Thank you, and may God bless each one of you.
Good evening. I'm not going to take much of your time. When I was asked to say a little something, I asked myself what I was going to talk about, even though it was just yesterday. So I think I'm going to spend my time, not very long, telling a story. What I want to talk about is the city that was full of farmers. city that was full of farmers. Everybody in the town was a farmer. That's how they made their living. They got so good at growing their crops so they can distribute to other communities that they run out of place to store them. So the north side, the east side, the south side, the west side, they all got together, powers that be, and decided, well, they got to build them a shelter right in the middle of town. It took some doing. People on the north side, well, they had the wood. People on the south side, they had the iron, they had the metal. People on the east side had the concrete. And the people on the other side had all of the labor. All of the labor. So it took some doing. So after months passed, the building was finally built and everybody was able to hang on to the crops instead of losing them because they couldn't get them out fast enough. I told that story because for that to happen, to save the crops of the city, it took people from the north, south, east, and west of the city to get together to put this building together so they could save their crops on one accord. Now, what I didn't mention is there was no race involved, there was no age involved, there was no religion involved, there was no sexuality involved. They got together and they did it. That is what I consider bridging the gap. I've been bridging the gap in law enforcement for 30 years. I finally retired in 2017. Apparently my job wasn't done. My job now is to continue doing what I've been doing, bridging the gap. And what I say bridging the gap, what my responsibility is in my head, didn't start when I got to law enforcement. Mine started with home training, because in law enforcement now, what we need more of now, and you can stop and ask an officer now, you need some training, you need some humanity. You need to understand that everybody you deal with doesn't need to go to jail. You need to figure out that everybody that breaks the law doesn't need to go to jail. You really need to figure that out. But that didn't start with training with me. That started at home a long time ago. It started with caring for others. It started with seeing no different, seeing any different in my neighbor. And it started with, I don't care what your thoughts are as long as we can come to common ground. Keeping that in mind, that's why I'm back in law enforcement right now, and I'm going to continue to bridge the gap so I can do my part in society and love the community that I live in. Thank you.
As Officer Nixon mentioned, this entire thing is about unity. We're coming together to rally together to show everybody else the example that Fort Smith can be when we come together as one, united. So in that same vein, we're going to play some music here, and I'd like to see us do some united dancing, if y'all are good with that.
First of all, I'm not going to take up a lot of your time, but I just want to say that we've had several peaceful protests here around the area in Fort Smith, and as the public promised us that it would be peaceful, it was. And I would like to thank the citizens of Fort Smith on behalf of the Fort Smith Police Department for those peaceful protests. As far as bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community of Fort Smith, I think that the Fort Smith Police Department and the surrounding agencies, law enforcement agencies in this area has a pretty good relationship with our community. I think that that the community is towards the police department is increasing their effort in bridging the gap, as well as the Fort Smith Police Department and law enforcement agencies in the area is also attempting and doing the best to our abilities to bridge the gap towards the citizens of our area. I would like to just read the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics that all law enforcement officers go by. So there's some of you that may have not heard or may not know. Here it is. The Law Enforcement Code of Ethics. As a law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve the community, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsoiled as an example to all and will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to me or my agency. I will maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint, and consistently mindful of the welfare of others, honest in thought and deed, both in my personal and official life. I will be exemplary in obeying the law and the regulations of my department. Whatever I see or hear of a confidential nature or that is confided to me in my official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of my duty. I will never act officiously or permit personal feelings, prejudices, political beliefs, aspirations, animosities, or friendships to influence my decisions, with no compromise for crime and with the relentless prosecution of criminals. I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately without fear or favor, malice or ill will, never employing unnecessary force or violence and never accepting gratuities. I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held so long as I am true to the ethics of police service. I will never engage in acts or corruption of bribery, nor will I condone such acts by other police officers. I will cooperate with all legally authorized agencies and their representatives in the pursuit of justice. I know that I alone am responsible for my own standard of professional performance and will take every reasonable opportunity to enhance and improve my level of knowledge and competence. I will constantly strive to achieve the objectives and ideals, dedicating myself before God to my chosen profession, law enforcement. I would just like to say thank you for everybody who came out and participated today. And, you know, once again, I think that the relationship between the law enforcement in this area and the citizens of Fort Smith and the surrounding areas, I think is pretty good. And I think we all need to keep up the work and work a little harder to do better.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for allowing us to be a small part of a great celebration. I want to thank the Comprehensive Juvenile Services and everybody who worked so hard behind the scenes to make a successful event. So again, thank you. I also want to stand here and talk to you a little bit about my 35 years in law enforcement. I'm your former Sheriff of Sebastian County, and now I'm the Chief of Police for the Fort Smith Public Schools. We have our own police department. Thank you. It is so vitally important that our school resource officers have an opportunity to develop that early on relationship with our students. Our students are our future leaders, but most of all, they are our future. It is so important to me personally and the officers of our department, but I also want to make a special note of gratitude and thanks to Chief Baker. The courage that he showed when he first got on Facebook and denounced what had happened to George Floyd. That was a horrific video that hurt me and has affected me tremendously. Here in the River Valley, all your law enforcement officers feel the same. Far too long, this has happened throughout our nation. I'm not saying that this happens every single day, but we have to humble ourselves and we have to admit that it does happen. It's happened in Atlanta, in Dallas, Chicago, New York, Seattle, and many other cities throughout our nation. And the one component that is missing is the fact that the law enforcement leaders so far, right now, are stepping up to the plate. But it's been far too long, and I don't want to say it's too late, but it's well overdue. These things have not happened here in the River Valley. But as law enforcement leaders, we want to ensure that it never infiltrates our ranks. So after that video, I was compelled to call Chief Baker. I talked to him a little bit about my thoughts. He invited me to his home. We sat outside for well over a couple of hours and spoke. How can the rest of the law enforcement leaders step up to the plate and lead by example? I shared a movie with him called Courageous. It's about law enforcement officers signing a resolution dedicating themselves to God to ensure that there is no corruption, injustice, racism amongst their ranks. And I said, you know, maybe that's what we need to do. So then I reached out to the rest of my law enforcement chiefs throughout the River Valley, and standing behind me are like-minded men that were looking for the same opportunity that we are about to do today. And these are your Arkansas River Valley chiefs. We have Sheriff Ron Brown here from Crawford County, Chief Deputy Kevin Nixon from Sebastian County Sheriff's Office, Chief Ray Ottman from the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith, Chief Darrell Spells from Barling Police Department, Chief Levi Risley from our medical college, our shining example out here, our diamond, and Jamie Hammond from the Van Buren Police Department, who is the chief. I spoke to them all, and they all agreed with me. We have to stand up and be the voice. Let Fort Smith, Arkansas, and our River Valley be the shining example to the nation. So I challenged them to step up with Chief Baker and to come here and openly commit to ourselves, but most of all, to our River Valley community. And we came up with a law enforcement resolution that I'd like to read now. It is on these easels behind us that you will see all of us sign and commit to you. What I've noticed before I read this is time and time again, we as law enforcement officers fail to take the ethical bullet. We'll take a bullet for each other, but when we see men or women in our ranks doing something wrong, we have to humble ourselves and admit that our silence is a weapon just like a knee. It's a weapon just like a gun. It's a weapon just like a knife. And here in the River Valley, in Fort Smith, Van Buren, Sebastian County, Crawford County, we're not going to allow that silence to take root in our community. So I'd like to read this resolution to you. As a law enforcement leader in my community, I hereby solemnly resolve before God that I will do all within the authority granted me to ensure that I and the men and women of my agency that are held to the highest standards of conduct. I will lead my agency by example through continual education, training, self-evaluation, and personal commitment to the guarding of the rights of all people, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of gender, age, sexual preference, guilt, or innocence. I will treat everyone with dignity and respect because of who I am as a law enforcement leader, not because how they treat me or what I think about them, but I will demand no less of those in my charge. I will value those who have the courage to tell me what they really think, and I will listen sincerely to those who disagree with me and truly understand their perspective, recognizing that understanding other perspectives makes me a better person and a better leader. I will make decisions with a commitment to the ideal that my loyalty must be to the entire community, not just to my profession. or to any personal agenda. As a continual reminder of my commitment to this resolution, I and my officers will ensure a yearly affirmation through solemn oath the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics. So not only has the men behind me stepped up to this challenge, I also challenge all law enforcement leaders throughout the state of Arkansas, all law enforcement leaders throughout our nation, to sign this Law Enforcement Leaders Resolution. Thank you so much for having us. Chief Baker, if you would come up and please sign first.
There's a train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the Jesus humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. So people get ready for the train to join, picking up passengers coast to coast. Faith is the key, open the doors of heaven. There's hope for all among those who love the most. For the hopeless sinner who would hurt all mankind just to save his own. Believe me now, have pity on those whose chances grow thinner. For there's no hiding place against the kingdom's throne. You know there's no hiding place. There's no hiding place. So people get ready. There's a train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on. All you need is faith to hear the Jesus humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. People get ready. People get ready now.
Well, Chief Hollenbeck is signing that resolution. I'm going to ask Ms. Dorena Storm to step on stage. We're going to present these documents to her to deliver to a member of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we expect to be held accountable to the things that we've promised here.
Thank you to the law enforcement agencies. On behalf of those that have participated in the Black Lives Matters movement, I accept these documents on your behalf. Thank you so much. I want to take a moment to encourage all of those who came out to the peaceful protest, to the candlelight vigil, to the prayer service that was held at Creekmore Park. Practicing your constitutional rights the way that it is supposed to be done, your voice was heard and your law enforcement responded. They have your back, they care for you, and they know that you need help, and they've made the commitment to do so. So honor and respect your law enforcement, because they honor and respect you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Again, thank you to all of the agencies involved. Can I tell you, just on a personal note, I respect this so much because there's nothing that happened here that caused them to do that. That was proactive leadership. They came together as agencies and decided to make a commitment to us as civilians and make a commitment to us who feel uneasy about all of the tension happening in the world. And this unity rally was the best time for them to present that to us. So again, another round of applause of appreciation for the Black Lives Matter movement, for Jarena for accepting that, and for those law enforcement agencies, captains, chiefs. Thank you so much.